And then Isaiah speaks the sentence that defines salvation and changes everything. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Notice the subject. It is not us laying our burdens down through sheer willpower, and it is not God simply pretending sin does not matter. The Lord himself acts. He gathers the whole mess, every sin, every failure, every rebellion, every compromise we justified, every secret we protected, and he places it on the servant. The word is heavy, laid on, not brushed past, not overlooked, not diluted, transferred, counted, assigned. Our wrongdoing becomes his burden, not because he deserves it, but because love chooses to carry what justice must address. This is why Christianity is not self-improvement. It is not a spiritual ladder where disciplined people climb toward God through better behavior. It is substitution, the innocent one taking the place of the guilty, the shepherd pursuing wandering sheep, the Savior bearing what we cannot erase. Real change begins only after this truth is received, when we stop defending our own way and finally trust the one who carried it all. Isaiah now slows the story down and invites us to watch not only what the servant endures, but how he endures it. The prophet says, "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth," and the restraint in that sentence is meant to arrest us. Oppression suggests force used against him, injustice pressed upon him, power wielded to silence and control. Affliction speaks of pain that reaches deeper than bruises, sorrow, humiliation, and the weight of being treated as worthless. Yet, in the middle of this storm, the servant refuses to use his voice as a weapon. He does not shout to win sympathy, he does not argue to protect his reputation, and he does not manipulate the moment to escape. He remains quiet, not because he has nothing to say, but because his mission is bigger than self-defense. This is where many people misunderstand Jesus. Silence can look like weakness to a world trained to equate power with protest and victory with volume. But Isaiah shows that the servant's quietness is not the result of defeat, it is the expression of obedience. Jesus could have answered every accusation with truth, exposed every lie with a sentence, and called down judgment with a word. He could have forced the courtroom to recognize who stood before them. Instead, he chose restraint, because the Father's will was not to prove his innocence, but to accomplish redemption. The servant does not remain silent because he lacks authority. He remains silent because he refuses to abandon love. His obedience is not passive resignation, it is purposeful surrender for the sake of those who cannot save themselves. Isaiah then gives the image that gathers everything into one unforgettable picture. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. A lamb is not dragged into battle. It does not sharpen its horns, plan revenge, or negotiate terms. A lamb follows, trembling, and submits. In Israel's story, lambs were associated with sacrifice, with blood that stood in the place of the guilty, with a life given so judgment could pass over. By choosing this language, Isaiah is telling us that the servant's suffering is not merely tragic, it is sacrificial. Jesus is not a helpless victim caught in the gears of politics and hatred. He is the Lamb who walks forward, knowing exactly what his obedience will cost, and still offering himself without resistance. And this is the astonishing truth. Jesus chose silence so salvation could speak. He held his tongue so the scriptures could be fulfilled. He endured injustice so mercy could be offered to the unjust. He absorbed accusation so forgiveness could be announced to the guilty. In that holy quiet, heaven was not absent, it was working. The Lamb's submission became our hope, because his obedience opened a way for sinners to be reconciled to God. When Jesus does not defend himself, he is defending us, purchasing life through love that refuses to turn back. Isaiah presses the prophecy to its hardest point, because the servant's suffering does not end with bruises, mockery, or a crown of thorns. It ends with death. He was cut off from the land of the living for the transgression of my people. The phrase is blunt, final, and unavoidable. The servant is removed, severed, extinguished in the eyes of those watching. This is not the language of a near miss or a symbolic ending. It is the language of an executed life. Jesus truly died. His heart stopped, his breath ceased, and his body was taken down as one who had been completely spent. Yet Isaiah refuses to let that death be interpreted as meaningless loss. The servant is cut off for the transgression of others, which means the cause is not his own guilt but ours, and the purpose is not tragedy but redemption. That distinction matters, because without it, the cross becomes only a story of cruelty and injustice. But Isaiah shows that beneath the visible violence, an invisible work is taking place. Jesus does not die as a mistake in history, as if events simply slipped out of control. He does not die as a tragic martyr whose goodness could not survive a corrupt world. He dies as a sacrifice deliberate, appointed, and accepted, bearing what his people could not remove from themselves. The servant's death is not God losing a battle, it is God accomplishing salvation through substitution. The same hands that permitted the nails were guiding the outcome, not with cold detachment, but with holy love that was willing to pay the price justice required. Then Isaiah adds a detail so specific it sounds almost impossible to predict centuries in advance. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. The servant is treated like a criminal, numbered among lawbreakers, condemned under the shameful category reserved for the guilty. In the world's eyes, his execution places him among the wicked, and his burial should follow the same pattern: an unmarked grave, a discarded body, a forgotten end. That is what was assigned to him, the disposal reserved for those deemed worthless. Yet Isaiah says something else happens alongside that disgrace. Somehow, in death, the servant is also connected with the rich. A criminal's death, but a rich man's tomb. In the life of Jesus, those two lines converge with striking clarity. He is executed in the company of the condemned, treated as though his place is among sinners. And yet, when death has done its worst, his body is not thrown away. He is laid in a tomb that does not belong to a poor criminal, but to a wealthy man honored in burial, even after humiliation in judgment. The prophecy does not merely gesture toward an idea, it sketches the shape of an event. Isaiah shows us that even in the details of death and burial, God is not improvising. The servant is cut off for us, and even the grave becomes part of the promise.